Ontario has one of the most diverse populations in the world, but not everyone is currently getting the fair shake they might, even when emphasis is placed on eliminating bias and moving towards greater fairness and inclusion. Where does that leave the kind of workplace training on offer today, and how can it help get results? Let's ask. In Waterloo, Ontario, Kathy Hogarth, Professor and Dean of the Faculty of Social Work at Wilfrid Laurier University. And our next three guests, all in the provincial capital, starting with Joshua Harold, Professor in the Faculty of Liberal Arts and Sciences and Innovative Learning at Humber College and at the University of Guelph-Humber. Indigenous Human Resources Consultant Crystal Abatasaway, President of IPAC, the Indigenous Professional Association of Canada. She's a Senior Manager at TD Bank. And we welcome back Shakil Chowdhury, author of Deep Diversity, a compassionate scientific approach to achieving racial justice, and co-founder of Anima Leadership. And it's great to have you all on our program tonight. Shakil, let's just sort of do a quick recap here. In the interview that just aired, you said that a lot of the diversity and inclusion training that's being mandated by employers is not particularly effective and not particularly good. How come?
Well, I'd start like this by saying, I'd back up a little bit and say that most people will say things like diversity training doesn't work. And I want to start by saying that to say diversity training, equity and racial justice training doesn't work is like saying learning to read and write doesn't work. Learning to read and write has been embraced in society as a literacy project with an estimation of 360 hours to become, for an adult to become literate in English, for example. Now, equally, racial justice and equity needs to be embraced as a literacy project with a similar benchmark of 360 hours of learning to develop any kind of fluidity. See, initially, letters are just squiggly lines. They don't mean anything, but over time, as we learn to read and write, letters, words, sentences all gather and they create meaning. And pattern recognition, once you decode the pattern, reading and writing is much more simple. Equally, racial justice and equity needs to be reframed as a literacy project because there are predictable patterns. And the problem is we haven't been taught about these patterns. And so as a result, we don't recognize them. So if a manager doesn't recognize, for example, the long established pattern that women are more likely to be interrupted at meetings than their male counterparts, then they don't see the pattern, they don't interrupt it, and they don't link it to sexism. And as a result, women are demoralized under their watch. And so what I would say is that racism and sexism, for example, are system problems, and we've got to help leaders become system thinkers. And that's developing pattern recognition skills. And I would suggest that 360 hours is a good benchmark to start with.
All right, let's survey your colleagues here on the program tonight and see what they think about workplace mandated diversity and inclusion training. Kathy, you want to start us off? What's your view on it?
You know, I think I'm going to use the analogy Shakil just used. I think it is not the problem of literacy, EDI literacy. I really think it is literacy and that workplace training is not the outcome. There must be more. Why folks would say it's not working is simply that we do training and then what? So there are a lot of folks who know how to write well. And then what? What do you do with writing well? So we must be doing more than merely workplace training. We've trained people to be great racists. We've given them great language for racism to use it as tools in their racist, in continuing racism. And so I think it is literacy and then.
All right, thank you, Kathy. Crystal, would you follow up? Workplace mandated training, what's your view?
Yeah, I would say that if we are training once a year, of course that's not going to be effective. Diversity and inclusion is a lifelong journey. It's a process. And being one of the most diverse countries, cities, you can't travel to every country in 1 year. It's ongoing. And so to be effective, we need to do as much storytelling. That always on approach that my colleague just mentioned, of course, needs to take place. It's when we have strong understanding of one another and take that time to really learn, that's when we'll see true success.
Joshua, your view.
I think the mandated training provides a good starting point for conversation and discussion, but it needs to foreshadow some bigger changes to follow. And so, to the and then question, we need to think about how diversity and inclusion training is reflective of broader organizational cultural shifts that are to follow. So employees, workers know how they can use the language, how they can use the concepts that they're learning about in the session in a meaningful way, something that translates into their daily practice, their daily routines, their daily tasks, rather than a kind of segmented 1 hour or over the lunch hour session, and then what happens. So the what happens after needs to be experiential. It needs to be a part of those daily organizational tasks and sort of infused into the broader organizational culture.
Crystal, let's do a little first-person examination of your situation. You work in human resources. A lot of conversation in the workplace, obviously, these days. To the extent when people come into the workplace, it happens. I know a lot of us are online right now. But diversity, inclusion, HR departments are all over this, all over the place. What's it been like for you working in HR these last few years?
We definitely saw a shift 2 years ago with George Floyd, and now diversity and inclusion has become the buzzword. My worry is that we lose momentum. And, I think I was doing diversity and inclusion, 10 years ago, maybe when it wasn't so popular. And what I can tell you is that we're seeing a shift, not just with shareholders, but stakeholders who want more transparency. They're asking the right questions around who's in the boardrooms, and if not the right people that represent communities, what are they doing about it? And so I think that's my hope, is that, and also I'm seeing a lot of positive momentum and impact taking place, is that organizations need to have, and not just the brand, but also the executives, the leaders. And so with that positive change, I think we're seeing more of it, and we'll continue to see more of it, which again makes me very hopeful for the future.
Let me do one quick follow-up with you, Crystal, and that is, do you think HR departments in companies across the province are capable of doing the kind of diversity training that you would like to see?
It really can't just fall on human resources. It has to be in the ethos of the organization. Diversity and inclusion has to be in the employee value proposition, in the mission, in the values. We need to hear it at the top of the house with our senior executive teams, and we also need to see it, embedded in everything that we do. So again, if it's just the responsibility of HR, I think we're not going to see the results that we want to. It won't be an inclusive culture. However, if it's in the ethos and the DNA of the organization, those are the organizations that are going to win in the space of talent. Those are the organizations, I think, that will truly thrive with all communities there and represented.
Kathy, let me get you on that. Do you think HR departments are capable of doing what needs doing?
No. I'm with Crystal on this, in terms of it is not the role solely of an HR department. Changing the discriminatory, racist landscape of our society is all our jobs. It is the manager's job, it's the boardroom, it's the students. In my field of work, it is all our work. We must come to a place of society where we recognize that changing the social landscape for folks, changing racism in our country, in our society, is my job as an individual. It's your job. It's all our jobs, and we can't relegate it to one group of folk, one unit in an organization. It must be seen as all our work.
All right, I take your point. Shaquille, maybe you could follow up in this regard. You know that there are companies which have employees who, either virtually or in person, are going to be treating this exercise as a kind of a, we got to do this, so let's just sit through it. We'll check the box off that we've got it done, and we can move on with our lives. What would you say to those people?
Well, it's not to those people, it's actually to their leaders. I think two big areas. There's macro reasons why diversity training, racial justice and equity trainings can succeed or fail. Their success, first of all, is premised on training as the other guests have pointed out, not being the only thing. It often fails because training is seen as a replacement for culture change, as though training was going to create the culture change. Whereas a culture change strategy that has training as a support underneath it is much more likely to succeed. Secondly, executive leaders are the linchpin here. And executive leaders most often don't see themselves. They just think HR or someone else is going to fix the problem. And that is the problem. They don't realize that their strengths and weaknesses, their awareness, their sexism and their bias is actually playing out throughout the system. And so executive leaders, when they come to us, they say things like, just tell us what to do. And this isn't a what to do problem. This is a how to be problem. And that's where you get the difference between reactive and responsive. And one organization that I was working with, has been on this journey since 2016 with us. And their litmus test came at the George Floyd moment. They went from not knowing a lot to developing the 360 hours of literacy, what I would say, moving in that direction, so that when George Floyd happened, they were one of the only organizations I know that already moved towards trauma supports for their Black identified employees. They're also an organization in which and this is in the U.S. In the Midwest, that one of their billboards got vandalized by outrage around the George Floyd killing and was really focusing on Black Lives Matter. Many organizations would just take that billboard down. Instead, the leaders had learned enough that they were like, this is the right message. We need to amplify this. So instead of removing the billboard, they put the billboard in the busiest intersection of the city because they thought that was the right message to get across. So when training is done in a context of broader organizational change, which is looking at feedback and audits and actual DEI strategies with teeth and accountability structures, you're much more likely to get success in the training. And then you're less likely to have people saying, this is a checkbox because what matters to my boss matters to me. And that is a really big role modeling piece that is most often forgotten about and least developed, and as a result creates the biggest problems.
All right, having said that, Joshua, and just out of curiosity here, obviously every company wants to have good, plugged-in, strong leadership from the top, setting an example. We've talked about this already here tonight, the importance of that in a workplace culture. But why couldn't this happen from the bottom up? What's to say employees couldn't lead the charge and try to convince management of the error of their ways and bring them around?
Well, I think it's a lot to ask of employees who are already doing their work to take on this, role or this responsibility. But what I do think makes sense in these situations are to adopt a type of paradigm shift that the other panelists have described, where you have an employees as partners kind of approach. So rather than a top-down heavy approach where managers or middle managers and employees are checking the box off to confirm that they did the training or doing an asynchronous online module about diversity and inclusion, we need to see employees, everyone from all sectors of an organization, from a business, from my perspective in the post-secondary sector, on board and working cooperatively and collaboratively, right, to build and rebuild those structures that ensure an inclusive workplace environment. If you leave it just to the employees without the support and the resources to build viable, long-lasting, equitable structures, I don't think it will last.
All right, Crystal, let me try this. We all know it's difficult at the best of times to have serious, respectful, meaningful conversations about racism and race, period, anywhere. Is the workplace the right place to be having these kinds of conversations and expecting progress to be made in those circumstances?
I think yes. And, what you can see organizations do is, what's the right conversations to be having. And so, sometimes we'll see organizations completely take D&I out of it for the sake of risk of what could go wrong in a conversation. And I think the alternative is that we get to a place where we're comfortable saying, I'm wrong. I made a mistake. That was not my intention, because that's the only way we move forward. The more uncomfortable we are, our leaders, our people, to say, I thought this way, but now having this conversation, I know more and I want to move forward. And I want to look at my biases, look at maybe the unconscious, way of how I've thought about something. And so I think if we become more comfortable with being uncomfortable, that's where we'll really see success, and we'll have meaningful conversations with organizations and the people within them.
Kathy, I'm going to follow up with you on that, because I know nowadays the expression safe spaces is used quite frequently. The idea being we've got to create safe spaces in which people can have these kinds of important and meaningful conversations. But if you've got your senior manager on the line or in the meeting where you're having these conversations, or if the CEO of your company is involved in that, how safe a space is that for you to really dig deep and explore all of the potential meanings of what we're talking about here?
Yeah, safety have different meanings for us based on a particular position at any given time. So if I'm in a precarious position in my institution, in my organization, and my CEO is there, I may not feel safe, and that may be a real risk. But I want to move us beyond a safe space to talk about brave spaces. You asked the question earlier about, is the workplace a good place to have these discussions? I say every space is a good space to have these discussions, because racism is a relational reality. Racism exists in relationships. So anywhere we have relationships, the church is a good place to have these discussions. The dinner table is a good place to have these discussions. The workplace, definitely. These are the places where we have relationships. Safe spaces, we can often hide behind safe spaces. Well, I don't feel safe. And sometimes we also need to push ourselves to move out of what is safety, and let's understand what safety is. Oftentimes when we talk about safe spaces, we are talking about comfortable spaces. And it's not necessarily racism. Talking of having these discussions isn't comfortable. It's not comfortable for anyone. And so it's not necessarily, let's talk about what safe spaces really mean. It's not the same as comfortable spaces. So I like to push us to brave spaces and having these difficult conversations in brave spaces.
Okay, from safe spaces to brave spaces. But Shaquille, I saw you nodding your head while Kathy was giving that answer. But having said that, how much bravery do you think it's reasonable to expect from employees to basically, open up their hearts, put themselves out there, splayed on a table in front of all of their colleagues and maybe senior managers in a workplace to have this discussion?
So the way you've described it to me speaks of one of the big problems in terms of how we approach this work, is that we just think we should be able to have these conversations. There's no baby steps put in place to help people. It's pretty tough to have a brave conversation in an environment where people aren't even allowed to share how they're feeling. So in our work, what we do is we help managers through year-long programs in which they're given tools and practices, first to become vulnerable themselves. Their own vulnerability is really important, but also to create the right permissions, because psychological safety is critical. Psychological is critical for high-performing teams, because it's the teams that make the most mistakes and are able to innovate that are high-performing. They speak back to each other. They speak back to managers. In a context in which that's the same thing with diversity, equity, inclusion. Psychological safety is critical. That's the overlap between high performance and diversity, equity, and inclusion. Now, what people need to be able to do is recognize there's got to be choice in the process. And if you don't understand the patterns of why vulnerability might be hard and why it might be hard for Indigenous folks or for folks who identify as LGBTQ2S+, or Black folks in a context that's predominantly white and straight, then you are going to create an environment where it's not tactful, it's not thoughtful. But we can create strategies where people are able to take the baby steps. The first step is we invite people to do what we call team pulses. How are you doing on a scale of 1 to 10? And even that is something that requires habit building processes to get people comfortable. So, and then helping them about being able to talk about bias and what bias then means in organizations broadly and then in our organization. So you've got to graduate people into the process where they can build safety through both taking risk and exercising boundaries. Otherwise, you can make it unsafe because you've just like said, hey, I've just learned this new thing and I'm just going to start inviting people to share their stories. Well, that might not work because you haven't created a strong enough container. But we teach managers how to do that. We can teach anybody to do that. It requires listening skills, pattern recognition skills, and speaking from the heart and being vulnerable. Those are all things that it is possible to do. Otherwise, it can be kind of reckless and it can actually backfire as opposed to create more trust and safety. So there's methodology that's needed here. There's process that's needed here. Otherwise, it can go south. But we've seen lots of successes in which it goes really well and managers are having conversations with their teams that they've never had before that have supported the team in moving forward. And so there's lots of ways to do it, but you've got to do it thoughtfully. You can't just do it randomly.
No, I take your point, but I want to get on to even trickier ground with this next round of questions if I can. And Josh, I'll start this with you. I have seen this happen. I have seen it happen whereby there is diversity training taking place and a Jewish employee will say, you know what, I have the feeling that I am being targeted in this conversation because people of color see me as part of the white power structure, whereas the Jewish employee may see him or herself as part of one of the most discriminated against ethnicities in human history. And there's just a very different view of what that all entails. How do you negotiate your way around all of that?
Well, it's a tricky question, but I think around questions of whiteness and Jewishness, we need to consider that Jewish belonging and otherness needs to be understood as a kind of historical, social, and political process. And so whiteness is often, but not always, privileging. And to your example, where Jewish colleagues may feel they're being left out or even targeted, I would say that anti-Semitism today is not the structural problem that it was at the turn of the 20th century in Canada and in the decades leading up to the Second World War. But at the same time, we know from police-reported data, recent reports that have come out about anti-Semitism and violent incidents and so forth, that we've seen shootings in synagogues over the last several years, that Jews continue to be targeted and sort of cast as outsiders. And so while whiteness is privileging for white Jews in Canada, there are limits to that whiteness. And so rather than asking if Jews are white, part of the way the conversation can be framed is around proximity to whiteness. And this is something that is relevant not just for white Jews, but also for other groups as well. There's research on white Muslim converts, for example, or Iranian Americans and the limits of whiteness, and the sort of tension that's negotiated between legal categories where white Jews are recognized as white, but that differs from their lived experiences and experiences with anti-Semitism. And in some of my research, I look at how memories of the Holocaust, for example, how contemporary experiences with anti-Semitism kind of temper belonging and limit whiteness, or at least give white Jews a sense of distance from whiteness and those power structures. So it's a tricky space to be navigated. And to the points that were made before about every space being an opportunity to have these conversations, and why training may not necessarily work is because these complex negotiations that so many people, including white Jews, are working through, is very difficult to take that up in a meaningful way in a 1-hour session. And so, to Shakil's point about taking those steps, this is something, I do in my work over the course of a semester year, right, or years. It's not something that's accomplished in the first class, where Jews and non-Jews alike feel, brave enough or comfortable enough or safe enough to stand up and say, well, here's what I've experienced, and this is how it made me feel. Right? We need to be working on this as a process rather than a particular event in a given day.
Kathy, let me get you to follow up on that, and I'll pick on Josh's expression, whiteness is privileging. Not pick on, but I'll just focus on for a second the notion that whiteness is privileging. I mean, you got to know that there are some Jews who don't think that it's terribly privileging having somebody burst into your synagogue with a machine gun and killing a whole bunch of people. There are still Holocaust survivors from World War II who live among us. So can you help us negotiate our way around all of this?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things we've heard a lot of lately is white privilege. And we've seen a lot of backlash to this notion of white privilege, where white folks say, but I am one of the most underprivileged folks. We need to separate privilege from white privilege. There are many forms of privilege. So I am not white. I do not have white privilege, but I have educational privilege. I have socioeconomic privilege. So, and you may be white without other forms of privilege. You may be white and still underprivileged educationally, socioeconomically, and so on. White privilege simply means because of the color of your skin, you are allowed certain privileges. And it doesn't mean that because of the color of your skin, you are all good. Everything's okay with you. We need to separate privileges and understand that there are many forms of privileges. White privilege is but one.
And Crystal, I suspect the 58-year-old white oil and gas worker in northern Alberta who just lost his job because the environmentalists in Toronto managed to convince some politicians not to green light some oil and gas project there, don't feel terribly privileged most days of the week. They feel endangered. So is what Kathy and Josh just had to say, is that important for us to keep in mind?
What I can say is I want to go back to can you teach D&I? Can you teach privilege? And again, it's not going to be in a 1-hour seminar of a computer going through a webinar. It's about the experiences and creating environments in your organization to have authentic dialogue and to have those conversations, because that is truly the form of where you'll see a paradigm shift, is that when we can connect on that level, that's where we really have understanding, and that's where biases, racism can really change and perspectives can change on that matter.
All right, with less than 5 minutes to go here, everybody here agrees that this kind of diversity training is significant, that it can be effective, it can be very useful in transforming society, but I think you all agree that it could also be better. So let's spend our last moments here. Shaquille, start us off in just a minute to everybody here. How could we make it better than it currently is?
First of all, it's got to start with, according to best practice, it's got to start with non-judgment and compassion. The length of that's needed for behavioral change, which is the gold standard, is really important. So the longer the better. That's why I'm talking about 360 hours. Focusing on self-awareness through developing psychological literacy, that the gaps that exist, racism and sexism, aren't our fault, but our responsibility, is important. And developing the social awareness around understanding how racial and gender patterns play out, patterns on anti-Semitism play out, that's all really important. And then moving towards concrete strategies, how to help people then move for the learning from here into their actions and to their behaviors.
Crystal, how about to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely resonate with those points. What I'll say is it has to start with the self. We can't expect our organizations to teach us all of this on work time. It has to be this curiosity, this responsibility that we take upon ourselves to learn about Canadians, newcomers to Canada, all of these experiences. So the more we take that ownership on ourselves, I think we'll be in a better place.
Kathy.
We need to move beyond the performative training, diversity and inclusion training, can be a checkbox for many of our organizations and institutions. And we can do great diversity and inclusion training on a very racist, inequitable structure. So we must do more than training. We must push our organizations to do more, because training is not the outcome. It cannot be the outcome. We cannot continue to train solely, rely solely on training without interrogating the structures on which we are built.
Joshua, some advice from you, please.
The teaching needs to be dynamic and adaptive, and we need to be meeting participants where they are. And that means paying attention to the types of nuances that were raised in the conversation today around privilege, for example, and otherness. And so, when we're teaching and learning about the complexities of our lived experiences, the language we use needs to reflect those complexities, and understanding that privilege, even white privilege, is not absolute. I think would go a long way in helping participants and people who are interested and looking to learn, or even those who are required to take these training sessions. We'll encourage them to think about it in the context of their own lived experiences. And once those connections between macro level structures and systems of oppression and the interlocking systems of oppression can be made on an individual level, we can begin to enact some positive change in the workplace and everywhere we go, not just limiting it to a particular space or point in time.
I would simply add to all that, I can't wait till COVID is in the rearview mirror so that we can do some of this stuff in person as opposed to online, because it's way better in person. At least that's my personal experience with all of this. Shaquille, Kathy, Crystal, Joshua, it's really good of all of you to join us here on TVO tonight. Many thanks and stay well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks.
The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.